Hello, I'm Jordan. This is Ernie, and I'm coming at you with another tag today. This is the Jane Austen at Home tag. It was created by Tilly Shelf, which is a channel that I was not aware of until I saw this tag. It's a great channel. You should check it out if you haven't seen it. And I was tagged by Jack over at the Rambling Raconteur. I am not a Jane Austen enthusiast at all, but this is a fantastic tag, so I'm going to jump right in. You are supposed to start by tagging someone participating in Jane Austen July. Uh, I'm going to say Steve Donoghue. I think I'd be surprised if he wasn't participating in Jane Austen July, and I'd also be surprised if he hasn't been tagged on this, but to my knowledge he hasn't, so I'm going to go ahead and tag Steve. And the first prompt is Mansfield Park. Name a grand book. I'm going to go with The Lord of the Rings by Tolkien, which is one of the grandest books I know of. Not just in the size and the scope of the story, but it's also, I think Tolkien's writing is quite majestic and lovely. I've reread this book several times, I think most recently a couple of years ago, and I'm already tempted to visit it again. I'm trying to hold off as long as possible, partly because I want to read The Silmarillion, which I've never read. I want to tackle that before I read this again. Two is Barton Cottage from Sense and Sensibility. I don't know most of these houses. I've only ever read Pride and Prejudice, just to be upfront about it. Name a book about a household in desperate circumstances. I'm going to say the Compson family, who appear in a couple Faulkner books, including Absalom, which is my favorite. But their book is The Sound and the Fury, which is a masterpiece in my opinion. And they are a family in desperate circumstances, both financially and I guess you could say spiritually, so I think they qualify. Three is Heartfield from Emma. Name a book you feel entirely the mistress of, or master of. This is an excellent question. I did have a hard time thinking of one. I thought about saying Mason and Dixon by Thomas Pynchon, because this is the book I've probably reread more than any other book. I thought about saying Little Big by John Crowley, because this book is closer to my heart, I think, than any other book. And I thought about saying, rather pretentiously, my Riverside edition of the complete works of Shakespeare. But, of course, I'm not the master of any of those books. Part of the reason I love them is because I can continue to return to them and keep getting something fresh and new from them. But also, I am not a particularly perceptive reader, and I'm an extremely slow reader, so it would take a level of effort and time that I'm not willing to give. I don't have the patience to give in order to master a book, I think. So it's a fantastic question. I'm going to have to respectfully pass on it. Four is Fullerton from Northanger Abbey. Name a book containing a contented family. I'm going to talk about a book that I have already talked about on my tag of the my tag of the five perfect books, my version of that tag, and that is We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, which is about a unconventional and kind of diseased family, but a contented one, at least at first. It's two young women, their sisters and their elderly uncle, and the rest of their family have been murdered under mysterious circumstances, possibly and probably by one or more of the survivors. And it is a wonderful, wonderful book. It's a perfect book, in my opinion. Five is Rosings Park from Pride and Prejudice. Name a book that is constantly being compared to other books. I'm going to say Dune by Frank Herbert, which I don't think there's an epic sci-fi novel that's ever been written that has not been compared to Dune, as far as I can tell. And it is, I respect Dune. I think the world building is fantastic. You can't deny the influence. I think it is, it's a very good, well-told story. Ernie agrees. But I do have some problems with it. I have moral objections to Dune. House Atreides and House Harkonnen, the two warring families, we are told to admire House Atreides. And I don't think we're given any good reason to do that. They are only vaguely preferable to House Harkonnen, in my opinion. They are less greedy and less treacherous than the Harkonnens, but they are still essentially authoritarian dictators, right? And I have a hard time admiring authoritarian dictators, which would not be an issue if it weren't for the fact that Frank Herbert clearly is telling us to admire House Atreides. Again, so that's a personal objection. It's nothing wrong with the book per se, I guess. It grates on me morally. So, but it is a book that's constantly being compared to others, and I do think there are many epic sci-fi books that are much better than Dune, including The Left Hand of Darkness. But we'll be getting to Le Guin a little later here. 6 is HMS Sloop, The Asp. Name a book that is looking worse for the wear. That is going to be my mass market copy of the Late Romances of Shakespeare. This book is falling apart. But it's well loved. I don't feel bad about that. It's a little sad. It's got sentimental value. I'll probably try to get a couple more ratings out of this, but yeah, this is certainly looking the worse for wear. 7 is Northanger Abbey. Name a book that wasn't as creepy or dramatic as you thought it would be. I'm going to say a book called The Hunger by, I think her name is Alma Katsu. And that is, it's a book that's kind of a horror retelling of the Donner Party incident, I believe, which sounds really good. I thought the premise sounded great, which is why I read it, but I thought it was terrible. It's just very lazy and thin, and you get the impression that it was written just with an eye towards being adapted. So I would not recommend The Hunger. 8 is Portsmouth from Mansfield Park. Name a book that disappointed you when you revisited it. I'm going to say Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I do love Frankenstein. I think it's a wonderful, timeless story. I first read it as a teenager and fell in love with it, and then reread it fairly recently and was quite struck by how, I think, poorly written it is. It reads, I think, a lot like it was written by a teenager, which it was, which also explains why it spoke to me as a teenager. But, again, I still love it. I still plan on rereading it. I just think it's not particularly well executed. I think that there was a later edition to this. I believe Shelley revised it later, and I have only read the original edition as far as I know. So if the later one is better, let me know. But I'm going to stick with Frankenstein for that one. 9 is Kellynch Hall from Persuasion. Name a book from your ancestral home. I was born in the Midwest in South Dakota, but my family is from Portland, Oregon, which is where I live now. And Portland has the honor of being the home of Ursula K. Le Guin as well. These are the Earthsea books, which I have not read yet. But her novel, The Lathe of Heaven, is set in Portland, Oregon. Not a huge fan of that book, but Le Guin is one of my favorite writers of any genre. So it's great to live in the same city that she did. 10 is Pemberton Hall. This is the last prompt. Name a book that you are ready to dive into. This is a book that I'm currently reading, actually, but I'm ready to dive back into it, and that is Andersonville by McKinley Cantor, which is a book that I heard about for the first time over at Kelly's channel, Books I'm Not Reading. If somehow you're not aware of her channel, you should certainly check it out. She has read every novel that's ever won the Pulitzer Prize, and in one of her videos on that, on the Pulitzer Prize, she mentioned Andersonville, which I had never heard of. It's a historical fiction novel about the Andersonville POW camp in the Civil War, and it is absolutely incredible. It's certainly, if it keeps it up, it's certainly the best novel I've read this year. So I am very eager to dive back into that. So anyways, yes, that is the Jane Austen at Home tag. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.